Hey guys, it's Kat, and today we are here to talk about a very controversial essay that has been making its rounds. An essay written by a conservative student who managed to get her teacher fired or at least put on administrative leave because she was under the impression that this particular instructor had it out for her, specifically because she disagreed with her ideas around gender. So in this video, what we're going to be doing is looking at this essay, looking at this whole situation, and I'm just going to share my thoughts, my perspectives, and so much more. Right now, I am currently on a live stream. I'm streaming to TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, and also YouTube. And if you are not following me on places outside of YouTube and you want to see, some different content from me, definitely check me out on there where you can also check me occasionally doing live streams. I'm trying to do more live streams here and there because it kind of makes my job a little bit easier. And, girl, that's what I'm about right now. I'm about making my life easier as we survive in these trying times. Girl. A University of Oklahoma student studying psychology says that the failing grade she received on an essay where she cited the Bible was a violation of her right to free speech. In her essay, which was a response to an article about how people are perceived based on societal expectations of gender, junior Samantha Fulnecky wrote that traditional gender roles should not be considered stereotypes. According to an earlier Oklahoman report, she cited the Bible to support her stance that eliminating gender in society would be detrimental because that would put people further from God's original plan for humans. Let's keep going. She received 0 points out of 25 on the essay. The instructor said Fulnecky failed to use empirical evidence and called parts of her essay offensive. Fulnecky noted that the assignment did not require students to cite empirical evidence and said that she believes OU's policy protects freedom of speech, even if people find it offensive. Fulnecky believed that she was failed because she cited the Bible. Now, when are y'all going to let this go? When are y'all going to let this go? When are y'all going to stop acting like you are being oppressed because not everybody agrees with your religion? And I'm saying this as somebody who was raised very evangelical. So it's not even like I don't understand where she's coming from. I used to go to Christian private school. And I remember when I would go to my secular school and I had my Bible in my hand and I would, I got into a lot of trouble because I was basically telling people they're going to go to hell when I was a kid. Fun fact about katblaque. But the thing I think is really interesting to me about this story is from the very little bit that I got about like what this assignment was about, it sort of just sounded like she didn't respond to the prompt. And instead of responding to the prompt, instead of doing the exercise properly, she instead decided to make a political point. This is a copy of the parameters for the assignment. Lesson 3.3, reaction paper, gender typicality, peer relations, and mental health. You must write a 360-word body of text, double-spaced reaction paper demonstrating that you read the assigned article and includes a thoughtful reaction to the material presented in the article. Points will be deducted when papers are deficient of any of these areas. I will deduct 10 points if your paper is between 620 and 649 words. And I will not give credit to papers under 620 words. Papers not turned in by the deadline will not receive credit. I have such a hard time writing something that's just 650 words, and anyone who followed me on Twitter for any period of time when I was on there will attest. Please remember that your reaction paper should not be a summary, but rather a thoughtful discussion of some aspect of the article. Possible approaches to the reaction paper include 1. A discussion of why you feel the topic is important and worthy of study or not. 2. An application of the study or results to your own experiences. 3. An application of the study or results to observations about other behaviors. 4. Linking the objectives or findings from the assigned article to other domains of development or other findings that we read about or discuss in class. 5. a suggestion for further studies or experiments that might help researchers better understand the topic being studied. 6. Alternate interpretations of the researcher's findings. 7. A discussion of how development in this domain might proceed differently at other developmental stages. 8. Your own thoughts about how development proceeds in the domain being researched in the article. There are other possibilities as well. The best reaction papers illustrate that students have read the assigned materials and engaged in critical thinking about some aspects of the article. Formatting requirements, yada, yada, yada. You need to write a paper like you're in college, basically. So those are the parameters, right? We're going to establish that those are the parameters, right? Now we need to look quickly at the abstract of this article. Here's the abstract from the original paper that she's responding to that was published in 2014. It's called Relations Among Gender Typicality, Peer Relations, and Mental Health During Early Adolescence. Abstract. The current study examines whether being high in gender typicality is associated with popularity, whether being low in gender typicality is associated with rejection/teasing, and whether teasing due to low gender typicality mediates the association with negative mental health. Middle school children, 34 boys and 50 girls, described hypothetical and rejected/teased peers, and complicated self-report measures about their own gender typicality, experiences with gender-based teasing, depressive symptoms, anxiety, self-esteem, and body image. The participants also completed measures about their peers' gender typicality, popularity, and likability. Results indicated that popular youth were described as more gender typical than rejected/teased youth. Further, being typical for one's gender significantly predicted being rated as popular by peers, and this relationship was moderated by gender. Finally, low gender typicality predicted more negative mental health outcomes for boys. These relationships were, at times, mediated by experiences with gender-based teasing, suggesting that negative mental health outcomes may be a result of societal repercussions of being low in gender typicality rather than a direct result of low typicality. So, to really summarize that in English and make it a little bit more simple, this is an article talking about whether little boys who, for example, do typical classic little boy things and excel at those typical classic little boy things are more or less popular. Same for girls. They also are trying to see if there's an association with people who are teased, people who are bullied, with them not being gender typical, aka not being traditional people of their gender. That's what this is about. And if you actually look at this article, which here, let me see if I can pull it up for you guys real quick. So when I looked through the original article that's being discussed, there's only one mention of the word transgender, and it's in the sources specifically for the International Journal of Transgenderism. You'll have to look into that on your own, but it's not a paper that, at least from what I've been able to piece together looking through it quickly, even really discusses transgender people at all. Just discusses gender typicality and how popular that makes you in school. So keep that in mind as we read. So this is her essay. We're going to read it. It's only 2 pages. I don't think it will be a very hard read or a very long read. That's what she said. Let's get into it. Sorry, I'm like 2 years old. I'm sorry. This article was very thought-provoking and caused me to thoroughly evaluate the idea of gender and the role it plays in our society. Now, already your first sentence was like, what am I supposed to do? Okay. Anyway, let's just read it. I'll save my reactions. This article was very thought-provoking and caused me to thoroughly evaluate the idea of gender and the role it plays in our society. The article discussed peers using teasing as a way to reinforce gender norms. I don't necessarily see this as a problem. God made male and female and made us differently from each other on purpose and for a purpose. God is very intentional with what he makes, and I believe trying to change that would only do more harm. Gender roles and tendencies should not be considered stereotypes. Women naturally want to do women things because God created us with those womanly desires in our hearts. The same goes for men. God created men in his image of his courage and strength, and he created women in the image of his beauty. He intentionally created women differently than men, and we should live our lives with that in mind. It's frustrating to me when I read articles like this and discussion posts from my classmates of so many people trying to conform to the same mundane opinion so they don't step on people's toes. I think that is a cowardly and insecure way to live. It is important to use the freedom of speech we have been given in this country. I personally believe that eliminating gender in our society would be detrimental, as it pulls us further from God's original plan for humans. It is perfectly normal for kids to follow gender stereotypes because that's how God makes us. The reason so many girls want to feel womanly and care for others in a motherly way is not because they feel pressured to fit into societal norms. It's because God created and chose them to reflect his beauty and compassion in that way. God, this is hard to read. In Genesis, God says that it is not good for man to be alone. So he created a helper for man, which is woman. Many people assume the word helper in this context to be condescending and offensive to women. However, the original word Hebrew is, I can't say that, ezer kendego. Sorry, I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to say it. Ignore me. And that directly translates to helper equal to. Additionally, God describes himself in the Bible using ezer kenego, or helper, and he describes his Holy Spirit as our helper as well. This shows the importance God places in the role of the helper, women's roles. God does not view women as less significant than men. He created us with such intentionality and care, and he, capital H, made women in his in his image of being a helper and in the image of his beauty. If leaning into that role means I'm following gender stereotypes, then I am happy to be following a stereotype that aligns with the gifts and abilities God gave me as a woman. I don't think men and women are pressured to be more masculine or feminine. I strongly disagree with the idea from the article that encouraging acceptance of diverse gender expressions could improve students' confidence. Society pushing the lie that there are multiple genders and everyone should be whatever they want to be is demonic and severely harms American youth. I don't want kids to be teased or bullied in school. However, pushing the lie that everyone has their own truth and everyone can do whatever they want and be whoever they want is not biblical whatsoever. The Bible says that our lives are not our own, but that our lives and bodies belong to the Lord, his glory. I live my life based in this truth and firmly believe that there would be less gender issues and insecurities in children if they were raised knowing that they do not belong to themselves, but they belong to God. Overall, reading articles such as this one encourage me to one day raise my children knowing that they have a heavenly Father who loves them and cherishes them deeply, and that having their identity firmly rooted in who he is will give them the satisfaction and acceptance that the world can never provide for them. My prayer for the world, and specifically for American society and youth, is that they would not believe the lies spread from Satan that will make them believe they are better off as another gender than what God made them. I pray that they feel God's love and acceptance as who he originally created them to be. My very, very first reaction to this is that she didn't want to do the assignment, and so she bullshatted. She bullshatted. You know? That's kind of the vibe I got from reading this. That, like, she just didn't really want to do this essay. And so she just kind of like, I don't agree because God told me, and the such as and the like, and the such as and the like, And again, do you know what's aggravating to me about this? The point of going to college is not so that you can show your professor, that you had the right idea. You're supposed to be able to read an article and genuinely engage with the ideas within the article. And I have to be honest, I loved school. I loved writing assignments. I'll be honest, the only reason that I am doing what I do full time, living alone, comfortably in Los Angeles, is because I had amazing English teachers growing up. And I really do mean that. I really do mean that. I had some amazing teachers who really encouraged me to keep writing. And sometimes you have to write within certain parameters because it doesn't matter. You're here for school, you're here to learn something, engage with the prompt. And I think what's kind of interesting to me about this is I haven't read the article. I could probably stand to read it. Maybe I should. But I think if you read the article, there was still a version of this paper that you could have written. But when I read this response, I don't get the vibe that she has that in her. And this is the thing that always strikes me with this particular sort of thing. I kind of talked about this a little bit in the context of Dave Chappelle and a couple of other comedians who have a very similar idea of, in this society, everyone is so woke these days. And, oh my gosh, the reason people aren't responding to my thing is because everyone is just, being pressured to accept certain things and da 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 da. And like, while maybe what you're saying might have some little nuggets of truth in it, at the core, you're bad at what you do. At the core, you're bad at what you do. At the core, you don't actually know what you're doing. You're not capable. You're not actually good at this. And that's what I got just reading it. Like, this is a essay that does not at all engage with the prompt. And the only way it kind of does is to say, from my perspective as a Christian, bullying and gender assimilation is good. And what would have been a better paper to write would have been, perhaps from a theological perspective, how gender assimilation is beneficial with like actual maybe like sources that come from Christians. Like, you're still wrong, but you would still be engaging with the prompt. Like, if there was a story about a particular person and you dissected that story and said, well, actually, according to, da 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 da, and this person who researched this thing, like, you could have engaged with this, but you didn't. This is something that didn't actually engage with the prompt. Do you know what this is? This is someone who read the abstract, didn't like what some of it was, and wrote something quickly so that she could go and party and hang out with her friends. And you think that by complaining and making a whole thing about this and getting your teacher fired, that, you're winning. But in all reality, this was an instructor that was trying to get you to engage in something that is helpful for you, that is good for you. You need to be able to read an article, engage with what it's saying, and share your response to it. But she didn't really engage with the topic, right? Because here's the thing I think she doesn't understand, right? Gender as a study, gender as a topic, gender as a conversation, it exists beyond the context of transgender people. Like, yes, it's true that there are transgender people who, because of how low they are in gender typicality for their assigned gender, may recognize that they are themselves not a person who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth. But what they're actually talking about in this article is whether or not children who have assimilated into traditional gender, aka, are you the football player with big muscles who, gets all the girls? Are you the cheerleader with, a cute perky body who, is beautiful and feminine and has long hair and all these other things? And does reaching for these things make you more or less popular? That's what the article's about. It's not about transgender people transitioning. And, and like I said, when I looked through the article, there was only one mention of the word transgender, and it was in the sources. One of several of them. And of course, you're going to study transgender people in the context of this, because obviously trans kids who don't assimilate into gender are probably going to experience this in the loudest way. But that's not really what they're talking about. They're talking about whether or not the boy who likes to dance, the boy who doesn't really enjoy sports, is more or less popular. Whether or not, the girl who likes to get in the mud, the girl who, enjoys working with her dad after school and in the garage and doing all this handy shit, like whether or not that girl is more or less popular. And that's the thing, at the core of all of this, what a lot of these conservatives believe is that these things are just good. And they accept these things uncritically. They accept all of this incredibly uncritically. They have no critical thought about it at all. Now, to my understanding, she is the daughter of some Turning Point USA person who has a podcast, right? And so a lot of this is probably all about just creating a social media storm against this particular school and furthering the conservative desire to, of course, punish trans professors, punish higher education in general. And, before we read all of this stuff, I'm probably going to repeat, I'm probably going to come back to this point later. But being someone who was raised very Christian, being someone who was raised very conservative, very evangelical, I remember how much of a culture shock going to art school in Southern California was, right? I remember being so shocked by everything that was happening. Some of my first vlogs in college were about how everyone is drinking and how that's not what they should be doing and how everyone here is living in sin. I was very much a sheltered Christian child. But the thing is, when you go away to college, you are usually put into a group of people who are, by nature, going to be different from the people that you were raised around, right? Especially if you were raised in a very conservative space, right? Like, I was raised very evangelical. My parents didn't want for me to know anyone who was not evangelical. I went to Christian private school. I had shock when I went to public school, which I still internalize as secular school, because I was so used to being around people that were like me. And going away to college and having to engage with people that were so different than me was a shock, even as a very obviously different person. Like, I'm a Black trans woman, right? And back then I was, in my first year of college, a very openly genderqueer Black person, right? And I was different, but even with my difference, I was still sitting around being like, oh my gosh, these people are living in sin. And I think the thing that a lot of conservative students, a lot of Christian students, a lot of sheltered students who grow up in suburbs and such don't quite have an appreciation for is that these communities that you live in, where you're surrounded by people who are just like you, are designed that way by purpose. And a lot of people, their criticism of colleges and how they brainwash you, what it really is you're finally being exposed to people who exist outside of the context that this community that you were raised in. And so you're going to obviously have a lot of surprising experiences with people that are different from you. But the thing is, what you're supposed to usually do, I think what a lot of us do when we finally break out of that, is we have these experiences, we recognize that there were some false things said, and we develop empathy. And if you listen to what a lot of these people are talking about, a lot of these conservative folks are talking about, they specifically resent empathy. They specifically resent you being able to actually be exposed to someone different than you, learn to identify with them, and recognize that they are just like you. That is, for a lot of conservatives, like the worst thing that could possibly happen. Obviously, hashtag not all, but for especially the Turning Point USA kind of people, that's all this is. And you probably still could have come back and said, and I believe that these Christian conceptions of gender are good, but you have to engage with the prompt. And the thing is, what are you learning if you're not doing that? If we completely ignore this entire conversation, what this is a student who did not want to do the assignment, who didn't care for the lesson of the assignment, who wanted to get out of the assignment. From my understanding, we'll get into this now, was able to get the instructor who correctly pointed out that she didn't properly do the assignment kicked out. The University of Oklahoma has placed a trans graduate instructor on administrative leave after a student received a 0 on a psychology assignment that described transgender people as demonic and asserted that gender roles are biblically ordained. The dispute has quickly escalated into a statewide political flashpoint. A second instructor, Megan Walden, independently reviewed the paper and agreed that it did not satisfy the assignment prompt or basic academic writing expectations. Fulnecky then filed a religious discrimination complaint with the university. See, this is what I'm talking about. OU confirmed Sunday in a new public statement that it takes seriously concerns involving First Amendment rights, including religious freedoms. In fact, what did they say? Let's actually read their statement. The University of Oklahoma takes seriously concerns involving First Amendment rights, certainly including religious freedoms. Upon receiving notice from the student on the grading of an assignment, the university immediately began a full review of the situation and has acted swiftly to address the matter. First, the college acted immediately to address the academic issue raised by the student. College leaders contacted her on the day her letter was received and have maintained regular communication throughout the process. As previously stated, a formal grade appeals process was conducted. The process resulted in steps to ensure no academic harm to the student from the graded assignments. Second, the student reported filing a claim of illegal discrimination based on religious beliefs to the appropriate university office. OU has a clear process for reviewing such claims, and it has been activated. The graduate student instructor has been placed on administrative leave pending the finalization of this process. To ensure fairness in the process, a full-time professor is serving as the course instructor for the remainder of the semester. OU remains firmly committed to fairness, respect, and protecting every student's right to express sincerely held religious beliefs. This person was able to get this trans person fired. So that's the power you have. That's the reality of the power you have. But you want to pretend that Christians are being persecuted because you didn't get what you want. And it's funny because at the end of the day, you can wrap this up however you want. You can masquerade it and twist it, you really could. But at the end of the day, you're just making excuses for you not measuring up. That's what I think most of this conservative bullshit actually is. Fulnecky noted that the assignment did not require the student to cite empirical evidence and said she believes OU policy protects free speech, even if some people find it offensive. Fulnecky believed she was failed because she cited the Bible, which I don't even think she kind of cited the Bible, but she didn't really cite the Bible, at least not appropriately. You got to have a clear tie to the article. You have to have reaction to the content and clarity of writing. That's how you get your points. Full points, 25 points, because they had to adjust that for people like you, frankly. There's not a clear tie to the article. Again, beyond the abstract. Clear tie to the article would have probably been, I'm going to pick this specific section of this article. I'm going to engage with it. I'm going to show that beyond the abstract, I actually engaged with the ideas within this article, the things that are being discussed, some of the instances discussed in this article. Reaction content. Does the paper provide a reaction/reflection/discussion of some aspect of the article rather than a summary? Now, she did a great job of not summarizing the article, but I think it's because she didn't read it, right? So she's fine on that end, but it wasn't really a reaction to the content. It loosely referenced the content. In fact, let me give you an example. Okay. Whipping Girl, right? By Julia Serrano. Whipping Girl is a fascinating insight into the world of a girl who is whipped. And when you think of it, whipping is a very violent act that shouldn't be happening to girls. Girls are gentle and they shouldn't be whipped. And so for that reason, I think that Whipping Girl by Julia Serrano is not so much of a good book. My personal belief is that girls shouldn't be whipped and that that's a bad thing. And that, what is this? It says a transsexual woman on sexism and scapegoating femininity. I don't think goats are scaped, really. I just don't, I don't agree with it personally. That's basically what you did, girl. That's basically what you did. You basically read the abstract and created a whole thing around that and then didn't actually engage with what was in there. And it's crazy to me how you don't see that. Is the paper clearly written? No, baby. It's not clearly written. I mean, and what's really happening right now? What is this? Because this sounds like the opposite of the reason you would go to college, right? You're not going to college to tell the professor what's what. You're not going to college to tell the instructor what's what. You're going there to learn. And if you say, well, I know everything and my perspective is correct and I know, you're then why aren't you teaching, babe? Why aren't you the one teaching, huh? It's not because, people don't want to support conservatives. This is the thing that drives me insane about conservatives. We're going to go on a fucking rant for a bit. So many of these people are just rejected because they're bad at what they do. I don't believe for a second that there is a better essay in this woman. I don't.
I am saddened that they're offended by the truth of the gospel and the truth that I wrote about in my assignment. And it saddens me to see that that offends them and upsets them the way it did. Jesus is always worth standing up for. And I just encourage those people that are dealing with something similar to push back against that kind of behavior. I would rather have my integrity and give my true opinion and get a 0 on an assignment than have to lie about what I really believe.
This is the level at which she can perform at. And I'm sure for a lot of her life, she's probably been told that, everything is just hunky dory and da 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 da. And like, she poops daisies and, all this other stuff. But like, actually, you're trying to normalize your bad habit. You're trying to normalize your lack of engagement, your intellectual dishonesty, your lack of literacy, frankly. Because the thing that's interesting to me about a lot of people who grow up in church, like a lot of it, it's just repeating the same phrases over and over and over and over again that you've heard your entire life, that you barely understand, to sound like you have authority in the room. That's all I kept reading. That's all I kept reading in this. That she's repeating language she's heard for her entire life that was deep and profound within a certain space. And she is upset that that's not enough. And I'm saying this as a former prayer warrior. You learn how to say the right things. You learn what the right script is. And some people are good enough at orating that script that they are actually able to translate that into a preaching career. I don't think this woman has that talent. But who knows? It seems like standards are quite low over there on the conservative side. No offense. Anyway, let's read what the professor had to say in response. Please note that I am not deducting points because you have a certain belief, but instead I am deducting points for you posting a reaction paper that does not answer the questions for this assignment, contradicts itself, heavily uses personal ideology over empirical evidence in a scientific class, and is at times offensive. While you are entitled to your own personal beliefs, there is an appropriate time or place to implement them in your reflections. I encourage all students to question or challenge the course material with other empirical findings or testable hypotheses, but using your own personal beliefs to argue against the findings of not only this article, but the findings of countless articles across psychology, biology, sociology is not best practice. And this is one of my big things too. Like, you're just not engaging with the brief, but there was actually a way for you to engage with the brief. Like, the thing that gets me about some of these motherfuckers is that as a former evangelical, as someone who was once very convicted, by their beliefs, I don't believe you. I really don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't. I don't believe you. And when I say I don't believe you, what I mean is I think you're full of shit. I don't think you're a Christian. I think you're a lazy person who wants to hold on to privilege, who doesn't actually want to do the work. Because had you actually been as passionate as you claim to be about Christianity, about the Bible, you could have very easily found sources and other studies to respond to this article with. Like I said earlier, you'd still be wrong, but at least you would have tried to engage with it. And the thing is, professors don't mind when you're being defiant. They don't mind when you are trying to, fight back with them. They just want for you to do it while you're also doing the assignment. And I'm saying that because I was a very rebellious writer. There were a lot of things I wrote where I was like, look, I don't agree with aspects of what we're talking about, so I'm going to engage with it, but I'm going to also talk, and I got great grades in my writing because I was passionate about it and I brought in sources. I actually went to the fucking library. I picked shit up. I read it. I researched it. I submitted my papers, you know, and got a good grade. And it just seems like you don't know how to do it. And what bothers me about some of these people, some of these Turning Point USA people, is like, you're a failure. You're not good at what you do. And instead of being honest about that, you want to hide behind your religion. And I think it's really pathetic. I really do. There's a part of me that has this like layer of offense, if I'm being frank, because it's almost like, as a former Christian, when I read shit like this, I feel like I could write this paper. I could write it a lot better. It just seems like you're full of shit and you don't know how to do this. You know? And you know, all of this anti-intellectualism is killing me. Because, you know, these same conservatives who are trying to tear down colleges right now still send their kids to them. Obviously, the point of all of this is supposed to be that this conservative influencer is, you know, trying to draw attention to the fact that there's a trans person at a college writing about gender. Everyone who is in support of her is completely ignoring the fact that she's not smart enough or capable enough to actually respond to the prompt, that she didn't actually do the thing that she was asked to do, and that her writing is indicative of this. No offense or whatever. They just want to keep going, oh, no. And what they don't understand they're doing is you are, you know, it's funny to say this because I know that this is what a lot of conservatives think of people like me. You are embracing and celebrating mediocrity, and you are fighting to do it too. You're fighting to do it too. That's what's fascinating to me. It would actually be such a different thing to me if you actually responded to the prompt, if you actually engaged with the thing, and then this teacher came back and said, you know what? I don't like your religion. But actually what you didn't do at all was engage with the prompt. In fact, like I said, my theory is you read the abstract and that's as deep as it went. You said, oh, they're talking about gender. I don't even like it. I don't even get it. I don't even get it. And then you went down this whole tirade and you thought you ate, but really you were eating lettuce, baby, you know, which good for you. You're losing weight, but like still, you're not nourishing yourself really. It's empty calories, babe. I'm sorry that I'm being such a bitch about this, but it's so aggravating because these people are always talking about, see this, we're going on a rant. I'm not going to probably include this. You got these people who really believe, they truly believe that whenever they see a person of color in a position of power above them, that the only way they got there was because, you know, some weird DEI scheme. Maybe they did the work, babe. Maybe they did the work. Maybe they actually did the work. Maybe they weren't able to just sit there and whinge and get what they want because they're the chosen people or something. Like, maybe they actually put the work in. Maybe that's how they got there. You ever think about that? No, because you feel entitled to everything. And you will feel that way and project that narrative onto people who actually work hard, onto people who actually did the work, onto people who actually responded to the prompt. It's funny because I think it's going to be these people's undoing. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's going to be their own undoing. I really do. I think it's going to be like, you think this is going to end in survival. It's actually going to end in you. This is the sad part, actually. It's going to end in you sheepishly walking in a line towards your own slaughter. That's the part that's so scary to me about some of this. This process of checking your sources, engaging with the prompt, actually reading these things, actually researching these things. This is actually, in all reality, real basic to your survival. It's basic, like, you need to be able to like figure out whether or not this is something you can ingest healthily kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? What's going to happen when you don't have access to that information anymore? It's sad because the thing I'm really starting to recognize is, and this is something I've been appreciating a lot because my parents have passed very recently, so I've been self-reflecting a lot about this. But I'm so thankful that my parents put me in good schools. I really am. I really am. I really am. Because it made it so that there are just certain things I just don't do. You know, there are certain, like, there are certain mistakes I just don't make. And I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect, but I'm saying, like, just the process of me being in good schools, getting a decent education, learning how to do my own research, I didn't really fully understand how important that was, frankly, until AI started melting people's brains. And I realized how many people don't do that. Like, when I listen to these people complain about colleges, all I can think about is those annoying people who used to make noise in school during class. Like, none of this was important to you. You didn't really care about your future. You wanted what you wanted. You wanted to make a scene or whatever. You know, and you can, you know, there's reasons for people doing that, but a lot of times those kids, you know, they turn into Trumps, really. That's kind of what ends up happening. They get so used to like bullying people that that's the only thing they know. And you can think that that's like a good thing, that's like a thing that's going to help you, but it's actually not. It's actually normalizing, in my opinion, a very weak foundation for you to stand upon. A much stronger foundation would be built with you actually doing the work, actually looking into this shit, actually engaging with the prompt. But you don't want to do that. It's, yeah, it's pathetic. Anyway, on that note, I think that's all I have to say. And I really would love to hear what you have to say about this particular topic. This was such an interesting little thing because it's one of those stories where I'm not surprised by it, but I was a little surprised by it. I was a little surprised that she was able to actually get this person fired, but not really in this administration. I'm looking forward to hopefully the time where we move on from this, because I really do think that it's a bunch of mediocre students who don't want to do the assignment, who probably should stay home. Don't go to college, I guess. If you want to not be there and do the college shit, stay home. Go to your theological college, get a theological degree. A lot of people, they go to theology school and it makes them an atheist. So who knows? Maybe you should do that. But anyway, on that note, I will talk to you guys later. I did film this as a live stream, and I do have a tendency of archiving those live streams for my members only. This one will probably be up for at least a little bit before I get to it. But I did want to make a point of saying that for my members only on my YouTube, that is where you can find most of my live streams. And also, if you don't follow me on TikTok or Instagram or Twitch, any of these other places that you can find linked in the description box below. If you enjoyed this video, please also check out my Patreon where I upload exclusive vlogs. I just uploaded a work vlog. I will likely record a life update vlog because I have so much shit to talk about, girl. Too much is going on. There's too much going on offline. Way too much going on offline right now. Anyway, until next time, I want you to always remember and to never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Bye. Bye.